Yellhorn Podcast, episode 5. Now, Zach, we on episode 5?
Five?
Wow,
I think we made it to episode 5.
we're killing it, dude. It's been about 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks since we started this. So, I don't know. It's every week I'm just surprised that we're still here, we're still kicking it, and that people are enjoying it, man. No guest this week, for a few reasons. One, we're probably just a little bit lazy. Didn't reach out to anybody this week. I know, I'm just kidding. We're talking about a few things in particular and specific. So we're not going to be interviewing anybody this week. We're not going to be sort of diving into other people's lives, interviewing other people. But this week, Zach, we're going to be discussing the $3,000 GGTour ChillTCG Cup that is coming on Saturday the 23rd this week. So we're going to be discussing sort of the best decks to play, what the meta might look like for that. Players Cup 3 is coming up. Maybe we'll touch on that in just a little bit as well. And then maybe just talk about some other things, right? I don't know. But I think that's sort of the guideline, right? That's
Yeah.
what we got written for the episode. But how you doing, Zach? How you been?
I mean, it's been pretty good. Just kind of getting ready. Like, I know that you were organizing the Chill Cup.
Yep.
But it's one of those things where I'm super stoked to play in that event. I know that me and the squad, we've been gearing things up, tossing ideas back and forth. I went in last week with a few weird ideas, just testing things out. And I mean, it should be an exciting week for Pokemon.
I think so for sure. There's a lot of stuff coming up. This past few weeks was actually really awesome as well. And I think we covered that in the last podcast, but things are kind of just going well. You know what I mean? And tournaments, they're all going crazy. The Limitless event last week popped right the heck off. I think the GG Tour
That was huge. That was crazy.
It was crazy, man. Well, I think there was a lot of hype right going into that event. That when they announced the ADP ban a few weeks ago, there was a lot of hype just sort of around that. There's been other ADP ban tournaments since they announced that before this first Limitless one, but everyone knows that Limitless is one of the bigger, tournaments every week. They get, probably the most players that don't play in other events, right? So their community of players for the Limitless oftentimes are from, I think, the European side of things because their time zones work out for them. And I believe Limitless is based out of Europe, right? The people? Is that?
Yeah, they're based out of Europe.
Yeah. So I think, it's cool, right? Because you have these tournaments that are run in the U.S., mainly on the East Coast, and we run multiple times a week. So we have our own sort of player base, right? Our own sort of meta, our economy of players over here on the U.S. side of things. But Limitless always seems to pull a massive amount of players from the other side of the country, of the world, and they get their own players. So this week when ADP was banned for Limitless, I think a lot of people were interested to play, and they had an amazing turnout. They had almost like 400 players in the tournament. Surprise, Zach, guess, if you're watching this at home, and if you don't know what won, it was the best deck in the format. Which is Pikarom. So
Pikarom, I know that you and I talk a lot about this in private, but it's one of those things where Pikarom and/or Mike Fouché, Magnechu, turns up with Pikarom no matter what, and usually does well at these major events because Mike. I mean, I wish there was a way to track all the success that every single tournament that Mike Fouché has played Pikarom at, because it seems like Mike only really plays in the bigger events.
Yeah.
Only really plays Pikarom nowadays. I mean, who wouldn't blame them? Pikarom's the best deck in formats.
I agree.
And then usually showcases how it's the best deck in formats. So, I mean, to me, I think, if anything, well, first and foremost, I don't necessarily even feel that the ADP ban is justifiable. That's my own competitive, take on it. If you look at the metagame, Pikarom was the best deck. Pikarom's still the best deck. Scorch is doing well. Scorch is doing well. Sure, you could throw a Mad Party in there. That's not that surprising. Sure, coming third place is huge out of almost 400 players. Colossal, I mean, I think we could see Colossal, especially in a field of Pikarom and Eternatus, doing well.
For sure.
And I mean, Eternatus is up there. Baby Blacephalon's up there. There's only a few, little dots on it if you could see that ADP was banned, and that's probably because there's a Licky deck, or there's a couple more Mad Parties, or there's that Dan Onderco with the Spiritomb Dawn fan deck, right? So it's one of those things where I feel like the metagame more or less kind of stayed the same. Sure, for a player like Dan, who usually plays weird decks at these online events, they might be a little bit more excited to play their weird decks, knowing that ADP is something that they don't have to avoid or something that they don't have to tech for in their deck. But I mean, I think I just think that it's kind of the same metagame that we've been playing in, more or less.
Yeah, I know.
And
I agree with that.
Picarom's broken. I mean,
it is.
if this would be foreshadowing the event with the Chill Cup GG Tour event that ADP is not banned for, I think that Picarom might just see more success with ADP because the ADP is actually a good matchup for Picarom.
Yeah, and I think especially even when you move on to like a best of 3 format, and I kind of said that I think in the last few podcasts, but for the last 2 GG Tour ChillTCG Cups, the 2-day sort of online regional style events where we do best of 3 throughout the entire tournament, decks like Picarom specifically always do extremely well. Especially like in Top Cut, it's won the last 2 tournaments, and it's been the overwhelming majority of the decks that make it into top 8. But not only that, things like Blacephalon seems to do better and better when put into a best of 3 format. I think that because it's really funny, the meta for the first GG Tour ChillTCG Cup and the second one was almost exactly the same, with just Picarom dominating and then Blounds actually doing very well is on top of that. And those last month, those were the only 2 decks that made top 8. So it's interesting. ADP won't be banned, like you said, for this tournament, but it's never really been too much of a factor in these tournaments, especially in best of 3. I don't find that ADP shines too much. But one thing I do want to touch on, as you were just talking about the limitless tournament meta, for the Chill Series events in particular, these are really the only tournaments that I'm super familiar with the meta of course, because I run the tournaments. But we haven't had ADP really do too much in the last 2 or 3 tournaments. And we've had a lot of decks that typically wouldn't have seen play, right, because of ADP do really well. Things like Mad Party, we've had plenty of Mad Party doing well in these tournaments. I'm just trying to think. We had an Excadrill win not long ago, and I'm just trying to get my finger on it. We've had some decks. Like, the meta has been very diverse, and if I'm remembering correctly, last week at Chill Series, 8 different decks were in top 8. So in our top 8, each deck was a different deck archetype. There wasn't any repeats in top 8, which is always impressive, and that's always good to see. But ADP wasn't banned for that tournament. So as you said, the meta for this Limitless event didn't seem to change too much. Yeah, without ADP, the other decks saw more play. Things like Picarom saw more play, E-Turn, Senti. All those decks saw more play because the people who weren't playing ADP played most of those other meta decks. But overall, I don't think that the outcome for the tournament was much different. I was surprised, Zach, that we didn't see any of those Excadrill decks do very well in that tournament because
I kind of think that like my testing group, when we kind of brought the Colossal to the table, Colossal just became the default best fighting deck in format right now. Just because like even like I played Picarom against Excadrill and I could skate out wins here and there. I don't think you could skate out from Colossal as often.
No, especially not with the Mimikyu that you guys run in the deck.
The Mimikyu is super huge in that matchup. So it's just one of those things where I feel like that's probably where Excadrill went.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I think if we could kind of form any kind of decks, because I know, like, again, we talked about it a few times. I feel like ADP decks are still Zacian decks, like Lucario Melmetal deck is a Zacian deck as well. I just feel like Excadrill and Colossal and any of these other decks are still just fighting decks. Even the Donphan Spiritomb deck that Dan was playing is still a fighting deck, and that's really to its core. So, I mean, I think it's just more or less Colossal might have been the catch-all or the better performing one. But, I mean, Excadrill, it's just whatever flavor you really like. Whichever one really works there.
Yeah, no, I would say, like, if I were to choose a fighting deck right now, at least, I would definitely choose Colossal over anything else. And I think that it's funny because those really are the only 2 decks that will probably ever see success of that type. Excadrill is a very niche deck. Like, it wins sometimes. If it just has a really good path. I
think the Altaria really helps out there too.
Yeah.
Like the Altaria is huge in there. Like you just get those free dubs, and maybe that's why it didn't show up, because maybe they thought the metagame would have more of these single prize card attackers. Like we did see a few Mad Parties. We did see the Spiritomb Donphan. We did see even like Zach Cooper with the Baby Blacephalon deck. Like these are decks that can get around the Altaria no problem. So maybe that's probably why Excadrill Altaria was not great for this event. But I mean, I could definitely see it popping up a little bit more for your event, the 3K.
Right. Right.
Probably not in any like massive quantity because it's one of those decks that just like kind of like slithers its way through the top, and there's only like a couple players playing it, or like 3 or 4 out of like 300 players. Uh, but I mean, I don't necessarily think the Limitless one just probably wasn't the correct meta game for it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree. If I'm looking at the standings right now for this limitless tournament, of course, Mike Fouché, of course, up top. And that's a whole nother bag of worms, man. Any of these big events, Mike Fouché always shows up. And his Pikarom list, interestingly enough, Zach, wasn't running hammers. And I think that makes sense
Yeah.
without ADP being in the format. Hammers are very important in an ADP
It's also the
heavy
Vikavolt in the
format.
deck too. The
Yeah,
Vikavolt's probably for the Mad Party matchup
for sure.
or anything else like that. I don't know where he really added the extra space or where he added those cards in. I see just from like a typical Pikarom deck. If anyone here is like, oh, Pikarom, he added in order. He cut the Crushing Hammers out, added in the Vikavolt V, added in an extra copy of Air Balloon, added in a couple copies of Chaotic Swell, and added in extra energy, which I mean are all fine. Probably doesn't matter too much in best of three, to be honest. But I mean, you got to fill in. You can't run in there with a 56 card deck.
Yeah,
I still like the hammers, regardless of any kind of format.
me too.
Just because Eternatus is huge, like
So big.
Crushing Hammer and Pikarom again. I'll say it, like if anyone hasn't heard me say it, it's not to remove your opponent's energies. It's to have more energies in play than your
Then your
opponent.
point exactly, which is always the most important thing.
It's a dominant move, and it doesn't have to do with like getting heads or anything. It's just getting more energies. And since you can't really play Turbo Patch and there's no Max Elixir or anything like that, it's one of those things where this is the only way for you to kind of get that leapfrog start above your opponent.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like looking at that list, I like the extra swell. Like without ADP, I think things like Scorch and Welder decks are extremely common. And Chaotic Swell is such a good card right now. If you're able to pretty much eliminate your Scorch opponent from ever really getting Giant Hearth on the field for more than, you know what I mean? Like if you can just eliminate that factor from the game, you're gonna just have a much easier time. And I think the extra energy is like, it's like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like it's there. Like one energy isn't going to make a like super big difference, but I feel like it's not going to hurt the deck. Overall, like if I were to play in that tournament with Pikarom, I still would have kept hammers. And not just
Sure.
for the E-turn, like in the mirror matchup, it's very good. And in general,
Even
like
like Scorch,
and
like
everything, man. It's
I'm
just
sure
good.
if you asked either Cash or Thomas or even like Josh Frink, there's a handful of these Scorch homies out there that are just like, if your opponent's getting Crushing Hammer heads, you're not really happy about it. Even though Scorch is pretty easy to get those energies onto,
Yeah.
you're not happy about getting Crushing. No one likes to see a Crushing Hammer.
No one.
I don't think there's any deck that's just like, oh yeah, I'm super excited about this.
Yeah, especially like it's one of those things too where even if like you're playing a Scorch or a Welder deck and they do get 3 energies off on that first turn, if you're somehow able to hit 2 or 3 hammers on your next turn after that and get rid of those energies, they're just at an incredible disadvantage. And a deck, especially like Scorch, which really thrives on having those 4 to 5 energy on Scorch range to get the 2-hit KOs. If they can't do that, then you're at an advantage. I mean, personally, Crushing Hammers is one of the best cards in the game, in my opinion. But it
Yeah.
is interesting to note that Pikarom without hammers did win this huge tournament, which I'm not saying it's completely the deck's fault. Of course, Mike Fouché is a fantastic player, but I think it's interesting. I don't know. I think that was interesting to note. So I think if there's one takeaway from an ADP less a no ADP format, maybe hammers is less prevalent. But other than that, everything seemed to be very, very similar. And
I mean, another thing when it comes to these top events, you also see top players. Like I know we've been like Mike Fouché, Mike Fouché, Mike Fouché, but if you look over there, like Kerry Potter, Nico Alibis,
yeah,
the guy who actually beat me in the finals of Australia, shout out to him, coming in with that fourth place finish. And then you obviously see other players too, like Zach Cooper. Zach Cooper has been a top player for a while now,
for sure.
coming in top 8 of this huge event. And even like Yosefi. Yosefi is not really a known player,
He's popped off
but
recently.
they've popped off with their Eternatus deck very recently, and they've been doing a lot of really big things. So when you look at it's not surprising that you see top players playing meta decks doing well at these events. So if there's any advice that I can give, if anyone's like, what's the best advice you can give for the chill event? Find the best meta deck that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Like right now, we're kind of in a format where we're kind of playing rock, paper, scissors with Pikarom, Scorch, Eternatus.
Yes.
All 3 decks are just kind of taking turns of being the best deck. I mean, I think Picarom's ultimately the best deck
Yeah, me too.
out of all those.
It doesn't
has
get the
most proven
respect though.
success.
It doesn't get the
No,
respect.
it's not getting the
man.
respect anymore because everyone's just like they're all jumping on fads, right? It's
Yeah.
just like it's one of those things. Picarom's the OG best deck this format, even though like it's been around the longest. It has the most success, period. But if you pick one of those three decks and you play it very well, you got a good chance of seeing success this weekend. I don't think.
Yeah.
I think Mad Party is tossing your hat into the ring and seeing how it goes. I think that playing any of these other decks, like ADP, would be a good choice if you're brand new to the game. I think, or if you're a little bit newer, a little bit struggling to find something consistent. I think that ADP would be good.
Mm-hmm.
I personally do not think I'm going to be playing ADP just because it doesn't fit in with like how I want to see myself playing at this event.
Yeah.
But I do respect that. I think ADP is really good. It's pretty neutral.
You have to respect the deck.
Yeah, you got to respect the deck. I mean, I think should be the fourth choice for anyone right now.
Yeah, and that's one thing to note, Zach. Like for this GG Tour regional, like it's best of 3, so I think things like Mad Party will struggle a little bit with ADP still going to probably be pretty relevant in the format, and a few other decks will as well. But I can guarantee you that there'll be at least one ADP that makes day 2. You know, there'll be a handful of ADPs in day 2, sure. just because in a best of 3, in 9 rounds of Swiss day 1, you know, if there's 30 people playing ADP, then you know there's going to be a handful of those that really do pretty well throughout those first 9 rounds of Swiss on the first day. So I think that's going to happen. Of course, I don't think we've really seen ADP do much in like Top Cut or anything for these tournaments, but it's one of those things where you never know, man. If there's one ADP in this tournament and it just draws the nuts and draws super well throughout the tournament, then it might just win because that's just how the deck works.
Yeah, there's no deck that's just like I have a 100% auto win against ADP.
Never.
Like I don't think there's any deck that would ever say that. Like I've actually just been reviewing like my Players Cup VODs that I have saved on my computer, part of a new series that I'm putting on YouTube.
Yep.
But it's one of those things where like even as I was like I played Picarom because I felt Picarom had a favorable matchup against ADP, and there's still games where ADP just cheeses you out. Like no matter what, like they're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna top deck this one card, and you're like, the whole game just changes.
Yeah.
So I mean, ADP is just like it can be very rewarding for a select few. I think you have to get a little bit lucky along the way. But to be fair, with a lot of these decks, you have to get a little bit lucky along the way. I don't think anyone would be like, oh, I would have got past this game if I didn't get a few of those crushing hammerheads, or my opponent dead drew or whatever. I mean, best 2 to 3 is such a significantly better format. I could scream at how much I dislike best of 1 events. And I love playing Pokemon, but it's one of those things where due to time constraints, I understand it. But 2 out of 3, I think is a lot more rewarding in this format.
I agree, man. And I think that it'll show who the best players are. And to me, like everybody has that argument with ADP that it's very linear. It's a very luck rewarding deck. Rewards heavily on drawing well. But to me, I feel like more so now than ever, the main culprit for a deck like that is Eternatus. And we see Eternatus just overall see an incredible amount of success. It's funny, Zach. About 2 weeks ago, Send Scorch won both ChillTCG Cups in that 1 week, or tournaments in that 1 week, the Chill Series, and then it also won the $300 cash event. Both huge tournaments, both cash tournaments, and both won by Send Scorch. It was all the rage that week. And then the week after that, Etern won Chill Series. It won Hexters. It won a bunch of other tournaments. So Etern was the hype all last week. And now going into this week, we'll see what the flavor of the week is. But it's always interesting to see. And to me, I think that Eternatus, especially after I lost to it in a recent tournament where I got 3rd in top 4, I lost to Eternatus.
Fly high Orbeetle.
I was playing Orbeetle. I got 3rd. Had a really good run in the tournament, but I lost mainly because I got unlucky a little bit with my prize cards and drawing into some stuff. But my opponent always got boss when he needed to, and he just never really seemed to not get what he needed. And his play style was extremely linear.
I should have never let Logan those Eternatus. I feel bad. I made you fall on the sword, man.
You did. I mean, I should have won, to be fair. It was kind of a thing where like I made a misplay game 1 in best of 3, and then he made a misplay game 2. So in game 3, everything was kind of on the line. But I just kind of got unlucky. I think I prized Orbeetle VMAX when I needed to get that extra ping off, and I couldn't find boss. So there was just a lot of things that happened where I just kind of got unlucky. But it seemed like Eternatus, man, like there was too many situations against Eternatus where I knew what he was going to do, no matter what. Like, no matter if he just had the cards or not, like, I couldn't do anything about it. So it really felt like I was playing ADP in the sense of, like, oh, I hope he doesn't draw what he needs to, or I lose. You know what I mean? So it was kind of one of those deals. But I don't know. I'm not going to hate on E-Turn, man. Orbital's clearly the better deck, so.
Yeah, I mean, Orbital's pretty busted. There's definitely good things about Orbital. Like, I don't hate Orbital's entire matchup spread. I mean, you showed me some of the gameplay from that event. I mean, I was there watching you. We were on a Discord call, and I mean, to me, Orbital didn't seem bad.
It's not bad at all, bro.
Like, it sounds like Orbital's been terrible for a while, in my opinion. Like, I think Orbital looks awful. It doesn't get those like, and then you're just like, okay, I'm gonna play Orbital, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like, Maddy's a little bit like one of these players. Like, you said that was what, your second tournament ever?
Yeah, I don't play in many tournaments.
Yeah, he doesn't play. Like, he just runs events. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, so we got this punk here who's just doesn't even like play events or anything like that. Likes Orbital fanboy, whatever. And I mean, you're starting to sell me on it. Like, I feel like it's a little bit more of a real contender than I originally thought. Like, it has some. Like, when you're playing against Mad Party or something like that, when I'm playing Pika, I'm just like, oh, I wish I had that Mad Party matchup. And you're like, perfect, this matchup's free.
Yeah.
And then you like go into other matchups where it's just like, it's free. So, I mean, I don't hate Orbital's overall matchup spread. I don't know if Orbital's been solved yet. I think it's one of those things where it's probably a deck that, like, Colossal... not to say that Colossal is solved now either. I just think Orbital hasn't been given a fair chance because people really flocked to the deck early on when Vivid Voltage was released, and then just did not give it a fair opportunity to kind of like see how the metagame flourished. And then, I mean, I don't know, you're out there doing results. I mean, you got one result with the deck. We'll see exactly like if anyone tries to follow suit. Depending on how the metagame goes, it's crazy. The Eternatus matchup is not terrible. I don't know how I feel about Scorch matchup. I don't know how I feel about Pikarom matchup.
The Pikarom matchup's actually not terrible. I'm not going to spend the whole podcast talking about Orbital, but specifically, and it's interesting too because in the tournament that I played in, ADP was banned, and I think Orbital has a much better matchup spread in a tournament without ADP because it struggles with hammers, struggles with metal decks and stuff like that. But it's interesting because Orbital did get top 8 at our 200 plus player Chill Series tournament, which had ADP in the tournament. It wasn't banned, and it still got top 8, and it was almost the exact same list. So, and there was only 2 people running it in the whole tournament. My thing that I've always said is if more people played Orbital, it would see more success. You know, when there are only 2 or 3 people playing the deck in every tournament, like obviously you're not going to see it get top cut very often, but it's a grass deck, so it falters in those kind of ways. Yes, like you can utilize Weakness Guard Energy. The Scorch matchup, specifically like the Senti Nets ability Scorch matchup, is tough because they do have Giratina. But, you know, one thing that you can do, and that I've seen in a lot of in Orbital lists, is you play the Mr. Mime, which has Scoop Up block, so your opponent can't scoop up any Pokemon on their bench with damage counters on them. This can be very good, so like even against that Scorch matchup, they'll play Giratina, they'll knock off your Weakness Guard Energy. If they do that the same turn that they get a KO, that's very difficult for you to win that game. But if you're somehow able to survive that turn getting that Weakness Guard Energy knocked off, and then you lock it onto your bench, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. So that's kind of one way that you possibly can win, but for the most part, you're most likely not winning that matchup against Scorch, and you auto-lose against Luke Metal. And those seem like pretty big losses right now in the format. Really not being able to beat Luke Metal or Scorch kind of does put that deck down quite a ways. But for the most part, I think it has a really good matchup against almost anything else. Colossal seeing more play. It's got a good Colossal matchup. I think it does well against E-Turn. It's not great. Again, it kind of comes down to just like a draw competition, like who draws the cards that they need. And then Pikarom, I like the Pikarom matchup with Orbital. Just because they really have to play it smart, right? I'm not saying that like you just auto win it, but like your opponent really has to play it smart, and they can't.
Yeah, you got to play around. Like Orbital's also one of those things where like I think Orbital is tested against Pikarom. I don't think Pikarom's tested against Orbital.
Exactly. They
like,
have.
If you ask me how I'm playing the matchup, like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start piecing things together. Like, yeah, I probably don't want to go in with a Mewtwo strat because you're gonna shut me off with your Mimikyu. So that means I have to change things up. But beyond that, I'm not entirely sure how I want to like focus on this matchup. I mean, I think it's interesting. It's very interesting.
It is because you can't pile energies onto any of your Pokemon like Pikarom likes to do, because Orbital will punish you for that, and it will get the one-hit KO, which is huge. You have the Mimikyu for the Mewtwo, right?
Yeah.
But you also have so many switching options in the deck that makes that paralysis from Choo Choo not really an issue at the same time. So the deck handles Pikarom very well. And one thing that I've come to realize a lot of times is with these VMAX Pokemon, Zach, the sort of Big Charm Malilana sort of strategy is just absolutely busted. And Orbital doesn't have that much HP; it only has 310. It makes me wonder why some of these other decks, like E-Turn, which in theory has a very similar flow to it, where you just manually attach energies, you fill up your board, and then you try to just start hitting away. Whereas Orbital, you do very much the same thing, except you just try to set up your Orbitals and get them switched out to get the pings off. But realistically, you just attach 2 energies and you start hitting away. And it really makes me wonder why people don't just run Big Charm and Malilana in every VMAX deck, because it seems incredibly powerful.
So I have a real good answer to that. I think it's just because Orbital's inherently worse. And it's unfortunate. I feel like in those other decks, they don't need as much because they're already doing enough. You're playing those cards to compensate for something that your deck is lacking. I mean, I think that's how all kind of tech cards, beyond just like straight drawing cards or anything like that. But I mean, I think those cards are because Orbital does not have the correct stats. You're trying to create the best stats for your deck. Unfortunately, like Eternatus does not need those. So not saying that the match was bad or anything like that. Eternatus is just inherently a stronger Pokemon. Like I know you and I just did a set review for battle reviews or for battle styles, and we were looking at cards. And by the time we got like halfway through, we're like, this card terrible. We're just moving on to the next card because they're just doing 20 damage. So the same way that like a card for like 20 damage for 1 energy or a card's doing 50 damage for 1 energy, one card's just better than another. Unfortunately, Eternatus and some of these other top decks are just naturally better than it. So I mean, sure, Orbital can fight for it and come up with a really unique list. And I mean, it does have that kind of rogue appeal to it, where I don't think many players again like have play tested against Orbital. Like I legitimately am not spending my time playtesting.
There's no
Orbital.
reason
If anyone wants to know what my time playtesting is this week, I'm playtesting decks that I need to explore a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think that I'm gonna upset some people with this comment. So for all you Centiskorch players out there, the Alex Szymanski, Josh Frink, you got Thomas Brophy, you got Cashman. I know Cash is away right now doing some army stuff, but like, so he'll listen to this in a couple of weeks and probably laugh. But I'm like, I don't know if the Centiskorch Nets is even the best way to play the deck. I don't know if you want to have a Jirachi engine. Do we go with Pedro's Silvally engine? Do we go with the kind of list that Ahmed Ali gave to my testing group with the Pokegear engine? And I think like these are questions that the answer is going to be like, I feel like if I ask any of those 4 players who are playing the Centiskorch Nets, really like the pioneers of this version, they're going to be like, no, the Nets is literally the best one. And here's, and then they just like, it beats this. I'm looking for like the long, in-depth explanation. And I mean, I challenge, I invite all these players to create content based off it. I would personally watch it. If someone made a video, if any of those players made a video on why and could like actually sell me on it, I would pay them. Like it's one of those things. It's just one of those things. I want to know if Centiskorch, if it's solved yet or not. I don't think it's solved. I think it's too fluid.
I don't think most decks are solved, to be fair. I mean, I think the select few are. I think Pikarom is very much solved. Obviously, maybe not entirely, but for the most part, I think it's like as good as it possibly could be, with some changes that could come depending on the meta. But I honestly, man, and like I said with the whole Malilana thing, I don't in my head it sounds great, but I'm not a great player. But like with E-Turn, you have 340 HP, Big Charm. That's 370 Malilana with the 120 damage heal. That's 490 HP effectively, and there's not almost anything in the game that's two-shotting you, right? So it's like it makes sense to me that you would do that just because you almost live 3 hits from almost anything in the game, and that's like even considering like, you know what I mean, things that hit for like 230, like 240, like you're still getting hit twice and living from it, you know. But I guess it's not that much. It's not needed. I don't know. To me, it seemed like something that should be tested, but like I just don't know.
I mean, I don't like more and more that you're putting it like this. I'm just like, how would it even go? I think like it's also hard because like the deck's already like running, like in order for Eternatus to work. Another reason why it might be like beyond my whole like some cards are inherently strong kind of argument. I think like you have to have all these different dark Pokemon, put them down onto your like bench, um, have all these extra cards, and you can't like draw cards. It's not like a deck where you're like, I could play Crobat and a Dene. You can only play Crobat, so you're
Right.
only naturally drawing to that. I don't know if you'll be able to follow it up. Like Mallow and Lana seems nice. Um, I mean, I like maybe there's a version that works with like Evil Tall because the Evil Tall from Team Up has free retreat.
Yeah.
That would be kind of cute. Um, I don't know.
You'd have
I
to
think
run
there's
like a
like
tag call engine, right? So it kind of makes sense where like if you're running like Malalana multiple, you're probably gonna want to run like Goose Mahala, and just run a tag call engine with maybe a tag team Pokemon in there. So that makes sense to me, like that why you
Search of
wouldn't.
the Darkrai Umbreon. I don't know. It might be worthwhile to test. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that these are the ideas. Like, nothing's changing from these winning decks. I mean, if you're running into the tournaments, like for me, I'm spending my week of testing in search of the next great big deck. And if I could come up with something cool or some kind of rogue deck or anything else like that, otherwise I default back on Pikarom. I made my mistake last time. Um, I mean, I played Mad Party for the last major events, which was a huge mistake for me. I feel like I would have fared much better if I played kind of a tier one meta deck,
Yeah.
especially for like kind of the player that like all my accomplishments and all that stuff. Like I was looking for the cheesy path to win. I mean, again, I maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, and I'm just looking for another cheesy path to win. Maybe I'm like listening to you by your Eternatus Malalana idea. Maybe I'm listening to whatever. But it's one of those things. I don't think I'm in a position where I need to test Pikarom. I know myself as a player. I
You're
know
right.
that my Pikarom list is on fleek. I'm gonna bring back on fleek.
It is. It's
2021. We're bringing that
on
back.
fleek, baby.
I mean, if worse comes to worse, I could default to the Centiskorch Nets deck, no problem. I could default back on Colossal. I could default back on my ADP list. Like any of these top meta decks, or any deck that I put a significant amount of time in, I feel like these are decks that I'm cool with.
Mm.
Um, but if I spend my time experimenting with these cool ideas on like a new version of Centiskorch, I'm the new Pedro, or I'm the new whatever. I'm gonna come up with a kind of new rogue deck that beats the format. If I can come up with something like this and it actually works, that might be my ticket to success. Otherwise, I'm defaulting back on something lame.
For sure.
And I think everyone should be thinking the exact same way. Maybe you have your pet deck. Maybe you're the Eternatus player and you do not know how to play Pikarom. You should be the player who's testing Pikarom. Grab Mike Fouché's list. Grab my Players Cup winning list. Check out any top players' YouTube. Grab their best Pikarom list. Find someone who you can trust in,
Mm.
even if it's not Maddie or myself.
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of those things where find the best version of the deck that you could trust someone on. Play that deck if you don't know how to play it. Because you're not going to gain anything by testing your same Eternatus list all
Right.
week long when you already know how to play Eternatus.
Right. And I agree with that. And that goes into sort of that facet of becoming a better player. And there's plenty of great players out there who play the same deck in all tournaments every week. And they do well with it. But I think a true mark of a real top player right now in the game is somebody who can pick up multiple decks, depending on what the meta calls for, and do well with it, know how to play them, know their matchups. So I think that goes into it. And I think someone like you, Zach, who, obviously like is one of the best players, who can play several decks, but knows that for the most part, there's only a select few decks that are really worth your time, especially when you're going to be putting in the time and the effort in some of these big tournaments. And I agree with that. Again, going into this GG Tour, $3,000 online regional, it makes sense to me. Like, I'm going to put my money on Pikarom. It's best of 3. It's the best deck in the format right now. I don't see things like Excadrill or Colossal really, pushing it aside too much. But for the most part, man, I don't know. And it'll be interesting. Well, do you think that Pika will just take the 3-peat?
Yeah, without any bias, like I know that like it's real easy to be like, yo, Zach, you won the Players Cup. 2 with Pikarom. You're gonna think Pikarom is the best deck. Like Pikarom has proven itself time and time again to just clearly be the best deck. Like I do not give any kind of censored word about any other deck when I see like an Eternatus deck or a Centiskorch deck win a Hagster.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's awesome that they showed up on a Monday, played their deck, they played super well. That's awesome. I'm proud of my friends who do well at these events.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because Pikarom is clearly the best deck. If there was regional championships,
Yes.
which basically like Pikarom would be the one winning the regional championships.
I agree with
and
that.
If it's not Pikarom, it's a deck that's going to counter Pikarom. Like it's going to be like a Pikarom or a Colossal or a Decigoons deck.
Yeah.
I think how the metagame's exactly turning right now is since there's only 3 decks that matter, basically, because the metagame is like Pikarom, Eternatus, and Centiskorch.
Yes.
All in similar capacities. I mean, I think they're all going to be over 10% of the metagame.
Yeah.
I mean, that's because we're in a very diverse metagame. It's not the best metagame.
It's very diverse.
It's very diverse.
Very diverse.
But those decks are the types of decks that it all revolves around. I think we were in a Centiskorch reliant metagame where everything was orbiting around Centiskorch. I think the Centiskorch players added some cute tricks into their deck. I call them tricks because I don't necessarily know if it's going to solve the matchups overall in best 2 to 3. I think that's where it's going to show the matchups more on paper. And I mean, again, I'm fine to admit when I'm wrong. If I'm wrong next week on next week's podcast, I'll tell you how wrong I was.
Right.
Probably with a cool guest. I don't know. Let us know.
For sure.
While we're
maybe
here,
maybe the winner
that you want to watch.
Maybe the winner.
Yeah, maybe we'll interview the winner. Sure.
Who knows?
Anyways,
yeah,
it doesn't matter because I think Eternatus is now we're entering into an Eternatus metagame. So Centiskorch is down here, Eternatus is up here. I think Pikaroms are going to be like, cool. We're going to add the Yell Grunt back into our deck. We might add in a Wondrous Lab because a lot of these Eternatus players are getting away with 0 stadium cards.
Right.
And then they're going to be like, awesome. So now Pikarom's going to have the same favorable matchup, slightly favorable matchup that it's had against Centiskorch. Now it's going to gain an edge over Eternatus, and it's going to kind of prevail over these ADP decks. It's going to beat all the fire other decks like it always does. And I mean, I just think that Pikarom's going to be that it deck. The only thing that it's going to take is people playing the Pikarom deck. We'll see if people switch onto it. I mean, I could very well be hyping up Pikarom, and then I could fall into one of these traps again.
I agree.
And then I'll be like, I'll play Mad Party. Like, every player falls victim to these traps sometimes. But I just think, I agree with you. Pikarom's just so clearly is the best deck for this event. And I need to like re-listen to this podcast before I even like, I need to show this. I need to take this to the testing group. I'm like, yo, Gabe Smart, yo, Poke Hawkeye. This is literally exactly what my thoughts are right now.
Yeah.
When I'm too tired after playing Fortnite for a couple hours, and I'm trying to explain where my thoughts are, and I just can't. This is exactly where I'm at right now.
Yeah,
let's not fall into the trap, squad. Let's not fall into the trap.
And it's so appealing, right? To be that guy, like, and a lot of people want to innovate. They want to be these people, right? And you see people like Pedro who kind of comes into this tournament with a newer deck, even though he, I think, got that deck from one of the Schultz brothers. It wasn't built by him originally, but somebody who really coins new decks. Like, there's a lot of clout behind that, and really being the person that brings a new good deck into the format and into the limelight. There's a lot of sort of fame or sort of high opinion that comes with doing that. So I understand the appeal of wanting to bring a new deck that's not been tested, not been proven.
It's so much like clout.
It's so much clout.
In the Pokemon community.
More so than like, oh look, I won with this freaking Pikarom list that wins every week. But you need to realize though that there's a reason why that we consider these decks the best decks is because they constantly win, and they constantly do well with great players playing them. And
sure.
I'll remind you, Zach, and I'm going to call it right now. I mean, and one thing that I wish that we had more of was these best of 3 tournaments, like weekly, because we do these once a month, and it's really hard to get a grasp on this best of 3 meta right now with these online tournaments. And it's always sort of a wild card when you go into these because people play best of 1 all week, all month, every week, and they don't really have experience with these best of 3 formats. And it's hard to know, right, what the best decks are for best of 3 because you don't play it a lot. So personally, I think it would be really good to have like one big, or decent sized tournament every week that was just best of 3. And we could kind of look upon that and kind of understand sort of, what the best play would be. But I don't know. It's tough. And
maybe we'll see more of these tournaments pop up. Like, I mean, I think best 2 to 3 is like, for me, it's one of the only things that I will stop what I'm doing and actually play these events. I mean, I've been caught in some of these events where I didn't realize they're best 2 to 3. I mean, I think if you are an organizer for the Pokemon community, let your event be known and let them know it's 2 to 3. Let them know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Come up with a really cool prize support. I mean, whenever there's an opportunity and time is not a factor, best 2 out of 3 should prevail because all of the biggest Pokemon tournaments in real life are best of 3. International championships are not best of one. The World Championships is not best of one. I'll put it like this. Do you think if the World Championships was best of one at the last year that we played Worlds, 2019 Worlds, would Henry Brand be the world champion? I think if we got Henry Brand talking about it, I don't think Henry Brand would say so. There's no event that I've ever seen. If the Players Cup 2 was best of one, I would not remotely be as the Players Cup 2 champion. There's no chance that I would ever do it. Look at my weekly results. I'll honestly shame myself, hang out all my dirty laundry. When you see me go 3-5 with Slowduck at a tournament, at the Crollo tournament, it doesn't matter. I don't even care about these best of one tournaments because they don't matter, because it's best of one.
Right.
And I mean, I appreciate the best of one tournaments. Like, Maddy here's an organizer, and I don't want it to ever be like Zach hates ChillTCG events or I hate Hegster events. It's not like that. It's just one of those things where it just doesn't, they don't matter. They don't show the true results of the game.
Right.
They carry their own meta. And like, I feel like the meta is luck based. Like, half the time you're bubbling out of cuts. I mean, I feel like you've rectified a lot of those issues that make your tournament closer, especially with some of the time constraints. I'm actually super excited to play your chill on Wednesday.
It is going to be 15-point cutoff for phase 2 for that tournament.
That makes it so, like, not to say, like, the answer is quite easy. It's actually easier to make top cut phase 2.
Yeah.
Like, it should be easier. There's so many tournaments where I'm X3 and I have no opportunity. There's so many events where you got to look at it like this. Think about all the times you hit an auto loss in a tournament. Think about all the times then you hit a dead hands, and then you go 6-2 in the event. Or sometimes you're just like, oh, cool, my game crashed.
Right.
That could be your third loss.
Exactly.
You are out of the entire tournament. You wasted your whole night. There's nothing else going. If you're 5-3 and then proceed to go 4-0-1 or 5-0, there's a very good chance that you are making top 8 and you have an opportunity.
Right.
It's also a prize for a lot of players who might not have the daily success of the Josh Sutherlands or the daily success of the Cifuentes brothers, anything like that. Like, those players turn up all the time. They're very much in the online kind of groove. It's one of those things where I think 5-3 is very forgiving. It gives you opportunities. I think it's actually the greatest thing for the game. I could rant off on this for so long, but I mean,
I agree
as
completely.
a streamer, I remember I used to stream on Mondays because Mondays was a free day for me to stream. And I was playing in the Hegster events. And I loved playing in the Hegsters events. Like, for me, it was like one of the highlights of my week. Because Wednesdays for me was always a busy day, and I always wanted to play in the chill to support Maddy and all that stuff. But now I've changed my schedule up to do that. But I'd be like, okay, here's this. Oh, cool, I hit a bad matchup. Whatever, I'd win a few. And then I'm like, okay, cool, I hit another bad matchup. 6-2 doesn't make it, I had to drop.
Right.
I'm just upset because I'm playing for nothing.
Right.
No one wants to watch me play as I'm upset because I can't get any kind of prizing.
Right.
Like, I'm not like Little Dark Fury playing the coolest deck in the format, and I want to showcase the strategy.
Yeah.
I'm here showing you, like, basic, plain old, tried and true Pika ROM.
Just trying to win.
You just watch me get bopped by 2 terrible matchups.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm just pissed. At least with the chill tournament, I could get bopped by 3 horrible matchups and still make it.
Right. And I think what the sort of the new double phase structure of the tournament does is with best of one, there's always going to be that element of luck, right? Because when the entire set is dependent on just the one game, which of course like matters heavily on the cards that you draw, the matchup, and everything. The two phase thing helps a lot because one, like, getting 5 wins out of 8 rounds isn't necessarily super difficult for the higher level players. Like, sometimes, like, you might hit 4 bad matchups, or you might hit like 2 bad matchups, and then you might dead draw 2 times, right? Like, I'm not saying that's never going to happen. A lot of times, you will go 4-4. That doesn't mean you're a bad player, but it's much less likely than you going 6-2, right? You know what I'm saying? Or it's easier.
There's a lot of tournaments where I do not go 6-2, but most tournaments I can safely assume I'm going to go 5-3.
Right.
More often than not, I will go 5-3.
Right.
So, like, if you think about it, what it can do for the game. Players are going to be likely, like, anyone who streams the event is likely playing in the event longer for the ChillTCG event.
Mm-hmm.
So we have more Pokemon content of players who are doing well at events. We have more players who are happy because they did not waste their events over playing in a Wednesday. think about it like that. Like, you can go X3 and still be able to play the tournament out. You have to go 5-0, but you
Right.
have an opportunity. If you're a little bit of a weaker player, and I mean, be honest with yourself, if you're a weaker player and making phase 2 or top cut is a prize for you, this should be exciting because it made the threshold that much lower. Sometimes the threshold's too large. Like at Pokemon Regionals, I remember a day when it used to be seven wins, 2 losses. I only made top cut 4 times in that season that they had it.
Right.
The year after that, I made top cut over 10 times. So if you think about the threshold now, it's very, very cool. A lot of games also with this structure, I'm assuming probably will not go to time because players are not going to be IDing as much.
Right.
I think since the flat wins matter so much, we're going to see more of a true effort and we're going to see more players playing out their games.
Yeah, specifically in phase 1, right? It's like even if you go 6-0, like it doesn't really make much sense to ID the last 2 games because you want a good seed and since records carry over, points carry over, you want to get as many wins as you can in that first phase because when you get into phase 2, you want to be in the top 8 when that phase ends because that'll make top cut, right? So I think for the most part, it fixes that whole issue. You'll still get a few people, right, that'll probably want to ID maybe in the last round of phase 1 or in the last couple rounds of phase 2 if they make it in. But for the most part, yeah, I think the format for this tournament is better. But Zach, also it's going to depend too around how many players are playing. Last tournament we had just over 200, but for the week before that, with the $300 free entry, prizing and everything, we had like 350 players. So I think depending on the amount of players that play in the tournament, the threshold will be changed. But for right now, assuming that we'll get around 200, which seems to be kind of the average for some of these bigger weekly tournaments, then I think the 5-3 makes total sense. If we go back to 300 plus players, then maybe we make it 6-2.
I mean, I don't think it changes anything, to be honest. Either way,
we would just get more players
like
in phase.
You would just get more players in phase 2, and it wouldn't actually cost the tournament more time because the amount of players typically doesn't like. When you get to that certain threshold of less than a certain amount of players, sure, it's easier to run a 300-person event than 1,000-person events. And there's a chance that games get more reported.
Yeah.
So, I mean, with more players, sure, there might be a smaller threshold of more judge calls, or maybe there's a smaller chance that more games can go to time. But, I mean, I reasonably, I don't think it's going to change too much of the time overall. It's not going to change the round count in phase 2. And I think what it does, it gives all players a chance. Because if you go 5-3 to 10-3 with the additional 5 rounds,
you're in it.
30 match points would be top 8.
Yeah.
So I think we give every single player who's still in it has a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to start being like this player who is 4-3-1 has a chance or anything like that, or 4-4-2-2 or something like that. Like there needs to be a cutoff anywhere. I think 5-3 is more than a fair,
right?
And it kind of embodies the way that you kind of run your tournaments, where it's like a chill place to play Pokemon,
right?
And it's kind of become the most competitive events in the game, I find.
Yeah, it's funny too because of course, like when we started, it was all just about sort of the chill environment to come and play Pokemon. Because a lot of too much, and what we were finding, and I probably said this so many times, was that people really. With all the IRL events shut down, these online events really became the only outlet for competitive play. And since it's online, there's a lot of things that come into it that you don't get with IRL. Like you don't match up against your opponent in a real life tournament, and you just call them an effing loser, like no brain, like your deck sucks. Like nobody does that if you're sitting right across the table from them. But when you're online and you have you're hidden behind the computer screen and the internet, a lot of things will happen. And for that sort of
I understand. It's one of those things where like things are completely different than in real life play. Like in real life play, I could probably say it more often than not. I could probably say it better than anyone else here.
Yeah.
Online tournaments can get you into some trouble.
Yes.
That's an understatement. I mean, I think it's one of those things where take a deep breath when you're playing in these events. Realize that the other person behind the computer screen, they're not an AI. It's not someone you will never like. They are a real human being, part of the Pokemon community. And at the end of the day, I think we all just need to treat it like that. So I mean, I appreciate you having a very welcoming environment.
That's what it's
a TO.
That's.
And I mean, I think a lot of people enjoy your events. The proof is in the pudding, bro.
For sure. And I don't know. So yeah, I mean, again, Jack, we got that GG Tour tournament coming up this weekend, but the Players Cup 3 is also coming up. But it's interesting. Do you think that this big regional tournament coming up will be sort of a good thing to look at going into Players Cup, or do you think
Yeah,
that, or like because the entry tournaments for this Players Cup 3 are all single elimination best of one, right? So maybe I don't know. It's what do you think?
if everything that we said in this podcast was true, that these best 2 to 3 large events are very clear, a magnifying glass on our exact meta, or at least what we believe is the true meta for Pokemon.
Yep.
Because we're in search of information, and I feel like these types of events allow us to find out more information about the game. I think that this might set the tone for the Players Cup 3. I think I'm not entirely sure. If the Players Cup 3 starts Wednesday. I've heard a whole bunch of things. I mean, I'm just gonna wait for the keys to appear into my account,
right?
And that's when I'm gonna start playing. I mean, if you think that I'm treating it any more seriously than that, anyone, no chance.
You have all month.
I'm just out here,
Yeah,
you got all month. See exactly when they start. I haven't really looked too much into it. I probably should, to be honest. But I mean, I think that any of these bigger events are probably going to set the tone. Maybe we'll see less ADP at the Players Cup because of the Limitless event being so large. Maybe ADP will turn up at the Chill event because a lot of people like playing ADP. I know we've talked about it before with the ADP ban. I'm not sure which way to take it. I don't think there might not be any correlation in any capacity. But I would imagine that the tone for the overall metagame, not looking at any individual Players Cup 3 events of any players at all, because that's just way too random, whatever. It's just a kind of random snapshot. But I would imagine that we're going to see a few players playing the Players Cup 3 deck, or the events from the ChillTCG GGTour events. I think that a lot of those decks are going to be played at the Players Cup. I mean, I think that that's going to be, if there's any event to take a snapshot of what's going to change the early Players Cup 3, or if not the entire Players Cup 3, this is where it's at. We've been in a solved meta. I know that not every single deck is solved, and the meta's pretty solved. I don't think there's too much more that's going to come out from this event. It's probably going to be the same old decks doing well, maybe in different quantities, maybe a few different tech cards. But those are the decks that I fully believe are going to be the Players Cup, just kind of standard go-to lists.
Yeah, I mean, I got to agree with that, man. I think the only takeaway from formats without ADP is like if you're coming from a format like that into the Players Cup, I think keep hammers. Like that's just the one thing I can let you know, because in these best of one games with ADPs crawling around, E-turns crawling around, you're gonna want to hit hammers, and you're gonna want to just have them there in case crap hits the fan.
So I guess if anyone has seen success at one of these big, maybe you're like Maddy and you recently saw success at one of these events that does not have ADP. Do you, like, not to say do not let it get to your head, but do realize that ADP does exist in a real format?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say real format because the Players Cup 3, there's just a standard ban list, which is what Bella Bud and Miss Magius, which is I think the only.
Yeah, is that on Guru, or did that rotate?
I think Guru rotated in Ultra Prism.
Okay, so yeah.
Pokemon has an official ban list. ADP is not on it. ADP is very much a real deck. ADP is very much a tier 1 deck. It will show up in some capacity at both the Chill TCG GGTour event and the Players Cup 3. Yep. So if you were popping off at the Limitless event, or you think your Licky deck or your Mad Party deck was the best deck for the event, or you had a lot of fun playing those decks, do realize that we are in a different real metagame when it comes to these events that do not have an artificial ban list.
Right. And it's going to be easy for some players, right? Because they're going to look back and they'll be like, oh, this Limitless event was the biggest tournament recently. So, like, what was it like? What deck won? But it's very much not what you should be looking at when going into a real standard
series.
Format.
You can grab some information, like if you're like Mike Fouché doing well with Pikarom, you could take that baselessly. But it's one of those things where ADP definitely had a factor on his list.
Yes.
And the fact that ADP was not in that tournament. I'm sure Mike, as I'm expecting Mike to be playing in this GGTour event, is going to be playing Crushing Hammers in their Pikarom deck.
I hope so. I really hope so, man. If we see a Pikarom list with no hammers win this GGTour event, then I'm going to rethink my entire life. But
we'll
I
see exactly how it goes. Some people I fell into the trap last time. I'm trying not to fall in the trap. I'm just saying, Do not fall into the trap. ADP is real.
It's not a
like
bad
a
deck.
light switch for some of these events, but the light switch is on for the ADP decks.
Yes.
Do be prepared with your deck list.
And that's kind of why I don't like some of these tournaments now running ADP, because again, not only does it split the community, but you might get all these players who are like, I'm not playing in these events where ADP isn't banned. But like, bro, like that's the game. What if things come back to normal and we're in the standard format and you're in a tournament and you're like, oh, you're playing ADP, like, but like it's part of the game, man, and you can get comfortable
if
playing.
Pokemon wanted to ban ADP, they would
right.
ban ADP. I'm not saying they have not been slow to react to problem cards in the past.
Yeah.
I'd say a lot of players have said that maybe they take their sweet time on it. Maybe they're taking the sweet time on ADP. But for now, if you want to have the closest to real experience, ADP does exist in the format.
I feel like, yeah, I know, I agree. I feel like if Pokemon was gonna ban ADP, they would have done it a while ago, man. Because I feel like in Sword and Shield base set, in that meta when that came out, ADP was much more relevant and much more played and much more successful than it is now. And personally, it would just be really silly for them to ban ADP, especially with Pikarom being the best deck in the format.
They literally just printed an ADP League Battle deck. Like, I went to Walmart yesterday to do some like social distance grocery shopping, because sometimes I like to look at the fruits and vegetables when you get it delivered. It's a little bit awkward. I'm like, I don't want the apples with the bruises, bro. But it's like, guess what they had on the shelf? They had 8 of the ADP League Battle decks. So that means that why would they print a product and just ban it? To me, it seems like it's a very inviting product for new players. Yes. And as much as like these decks are, the Mad Party deck might be fun for a player to see success with that in events. I think you either go for the full-blown custom format events, or you do not, because a lot of problems like we've seen 3 prize card Pokemon in general, all dominated this event. It's 3 prize card Pokemon are more of an issue than ADP specifically.
Right.
And there's a lot of other we've already gone into this discussion. But if you look at it like Pokestats, not to treat it as any kind of governing agent in this community, but the fact that they do not realize these ADP list tournaments as official events, or that they even happened, I think that's something that's, for the most part, I'd like to see more organizers look into. I know that you and I both played at the Coffee Cup. Due to the time constraints, I don't think I'd play in the Coffee Cup again. For me going forward, I'd like to play in the Coffee Cup if ADP was not banned.
Right, because then it would be
too weird.
Right, it would be considered an official event, and that's kind of the case with a lot of things. But it's one thing too, because like Love of Course Limitless had a ton of players, right? So in one effect, as a TO, as a tournament series, like the more players you get, the more eyes that are on your tournament, and I think that makes total sense. And I think that right now, if I were to wanted to get the most players in my tournament, I would ban ADP, I would hype it up. But no matter how many players are in the event, if it's not a real format, it's not a real official standard format tournament, and it can't be considered as such. So we've covered this in last few episodes with the whole ADP ban thing. I just did want to cover it though, because now we've seen that tournament come to fruition, and with 400 players, no ADPs, Pikarom came out on top, just like it always does, and just like it always will, I think, for the most part, right? Of course, like, there are other decks that are good, but yeah,
We'll see how it happens at, there's that $3,000 tournament this weekend. We've said it a few times already. We'll see how it goes. And I think you and I could go back and forth talking about how we think the metagame goes in circles, but we got the 3K event this weekend. I think we just leave it at, we'll see how it goes. I'm excited to see how it goes.
Do you want to give a little tier list, though? So for this best of 3 format, let's just run down what you think the most viable decks would be to play. And I think that a big one to consider before we get into the list or anything like that, because we are about to wrap up the podcast. It's a short one this week. Cephalon is a deck that has always done incredibly well in these best of 3 cash prize tournaments that we run. But in the last few weeks, man, Balance has really fallen under with all that Centiskorch hype. There's just hasn't been a lot of Cephalon that really has seen a lot of success. And I don't think it does too well in best of 1. But do you think that it will see it come back in these best of 3 tournaments? Do you think that it's a deck that's worth thinking about for playing for this Saturday? Or
I think it's not even just like a Blacephalon thing. I think it's more of a Welder does better in best of 3. I think a lot of the Welder players have been experimenting with Centiskorch. So sure, we might see a surge of Blacephalon, Cracephalon, Fire Toolbox kind of style decks at these events. I think a lot of players try to tackle a large portion of the metagame or try to go for the kind of tried and true Blacephalon version of the deck. I mean, I think we could see it going, but I mean, in no particular order, I think Pikarom, Eternatus, Centiskorch, those top three decks kind of are tier S or tier 1
I agree.
kind of decks right now. Anything else beyond that or underneath that, I think Blacephalon, Mad Party, Colossal.
I think ADP and Luke Metal are in this in between phase where they're not like phase 2, but they're not as good as those top 3 decks that you
Maybe
mentioned.
that's fair. Yeah, maybe I'd put Mad Party below those. I'd put maybe ADP, Luke Metal, Decigoons, and Colossal because they're all very similar. Like ADP is neutral, so it's not going to be the top 3 where it gets those huge matchups. Luke Metal, Decigoons, and Colossal all are very much the same kind of style of deck where they're just trying to win against certain matchups and stuff like that.
Trying to just kind of auto win, like try to.
I don't know, that doesn't even place Blacephalon in like a tier 2 or tier 3 capacity. I mean, maybe Blacephalon has to exist somewhere in there. I haven't been a huge Blacephalon fan for a minute right now. Maybe now that I'm starting to test with Mr. Andrew Hedrick, Hawkeye.
Yeah, he's a great player.
He's got to show me the hot ways.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's kind of like a lost art in some ways, right, Zach? Where it's like, where not you don't. It's becoming an extinct species. These Blacephalon players.
Even he's been experimenting with other decks, right? Like there's that Rillaboom deck. Like to go from a fire type deck to a grass type deck. Experimenting with a Rillaboom deck. I mean, you never know exactly what's going on with the metagame. I think we might be in a point where people are getting bored with our current formats. So I don't know.
I would agree with
beyond the top 3, I think that beyond the top 3, it's very hard to place, or even like the top 7. Just to reiterate, Pikarom, Eternatus, Centiskorch, probably no particular order. Like I think Pikarom's clearly the best right now. Centiskorch and Eternatus are battling it out for 2nd and 3rd.
I agree.
ADP is probably a solidified 4th. And then I feel like Luke Metal, Decigoons, and Colossal all fight within that kind of realm of
with other welder decks maybe as well too. Kind of because
maybe if you want to throw other welder decks in there to put it in top 8 as just like other welder decks.
Yeah,
that's probably fair.
That's what I'm kind of feeling like is like all these other welder decks that are either considered Blounds, Welder Box, Reshizard, Tempo-Zard, whatever it might be. I think all those other welder decks are really good, but I don't find them to be as good as Centiskorch. That's why like I'll put them below. Like I don't think they're tier 1. But I think that they do fall into that category with things like Colossal, Luke Metal, and them. In no particular order, right? But I do feel like they should just be up there because they do have the potential. They're just not as consistent overall as maybe a Centiskorch list. But yeah,
if I could throw out any kind of last wild prediction, I wouldn't be surprised if Mewtwo just popped up in other capacities, other Mewtwo decks. I mean, we've seen Mewtwo Grass, Mewtwo Fire, Mewtwo Lightning pop up here and there. I feel like there's something in the universe that's just saying Mewtwo's been hiding enough for a while.
Yeah,
Mewtwo might be good. That if I could have any kind of wild prediction take, that would be my gut feelings sinker deck. So
I agree, man.
It's just like as an Orbeetle dude, I'm about this.
The thing is, man, like I really wish that the format and to me the format is. The main problem with the Pokemon TCG right now in the standard format is that some types are inherently better than other types. And if you looked at it in a vacuum, right, like each type has its own weakness, so everything is in check, right? There's checks and balances in play. If you're grass, you're weak to fire. If you're fire, you're weak to water. If you're water, you're weak to electric. And that's just how the game works. That's how Pokemon works. But not all type archetypes, not all Pokemon types, card types are created equal. Not all of them have the same Pokemon attackers of quality. Not all of them have the same supporter draw engines, energy acceleration engines, and that's why I feel like some types are better than others. Like if you look at Metal type, it's an incredible type right now. Yes, you have access to things like Luke Metal and ADP as tag teams, but you have Zacian, you have Zamazenta, incredible Pokemon. You have Metal Saucer. You just have so many other things that work really well that are incredible cards for that type. You look at Fire. Fire has incredible amount of support Pokemon and attacking Pokemon and Welder and Fire Crystal and all this other stuff. But other types struggle because they just don't have stuff like that. And I think that some types are just really forgotten in the game right now. Fair. I think Grass is one of those. As somebody who's overall been a Pokemon fan my whole life. Grass type Pokemon are my favorite, and I wish that things were just more viable that way. Psychic right now has just been getting absolutely, just hit in the back of the head. They're like, here's E-Turn, one of the best decks, and
it's hard though.
We didn't give you anything.
Saying we're also saying like Picarom's the best deck, and Picarom's like half a Psychic deck.
Yeah, but like think about
so
all.
If you're looking in weird ways, I mean, a lot of Psychic type Pokemon are good. It's probably just not to the true Psychic kind of standards of where we've seen a few years ago with like Malamar, how we see how a Psychic archetype is supposed to perform,
right? And that's
like that with these sneaky attacks.
And that's kind of my point. Whereas like Mewtwo's a Psychic card, which can make any really almost any deck a Psychic type deck, but the toolkits that you put Mewtwo into aren't Psychic type toolkits, and a reason why a big reason why these Electric type decks are so good is because they have access to so many incredible cards. Like you have Dedennes, which of course it fits in every archetype, but it's Electric type. It fits under the Electric type category. You have Pikarom, Raichu, amazing cards. They have Boltund. You have Tapu Koko Prism Star. You have that speed energy. You just have so much stuff as a Lightning type deck, and other types just don't have that type of stuff. And that's my big gripe with the game right now is like they just don't make cards equally as good for other types in the game, and I don't know. I say this as an orbital buff.
There's not a type balance. Not everything's balanced in the Pokemon TCG. Maybe we'll see it get a little bit more balance after Battle Styles or our upcoming set after Battle Style. I mean, I think rotation might solve a lot of issues right now. We're kind of dealing with formats that they might not have been able to foresee. Maybe they thought that Colossal would have killed off Pikarom, but maybe TPCI wasn't expecting, or whoever the card designers weren't expecting Mewtwo. But I mean, this is a whole other talk for another week, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk it out with a guest. It's one of those things where it's too deep for 2:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah, man. I'm just heated. Make Orbeetle great again. I need a hat.
Make Orbeetle.
Make Orbeetle great again. I need a Moga hat. And, Moga.
Someone make Maddy the Moga hats.
That's right.
But instead of it being a red hat, it has to be green.
It has to be green. That's right. All right. I don't got too much else to say.
I mean, at that point, we've given you your chore for the week, everyone.
That's right. So yeah, we'll wrap up the podcast. It was a short one this week. No guest. I hope you guys still enjoyed. So if you're watching this, guys, please definitely go check out both of our YouTube channels. Chill TCG on YouTube. That's myself. We host tournaments every Wednesday. The Chill Series tournaments. They're great events. We make videos on all of our coverage for all our events and other stuff in general. Check out Zach's channel, The Lone Blound. He makes tons of competitive Pokemon TCG content that is just great if you're looking to get better as a player. And overall, just looking to learn. Two great channels. We do stuff together a lot of times as well. So definitely go check us both out on YouTube. Go play in the tournaments that are coming up this week. So, of course, Chill Series will be on Wednesday tomorrow, or I guess it's the day of when we post this. So next week, whenever Wednesday is coming up next for you, definitely go check out the Chill Series tournaments. And if you're listening to this podcast this week when it comes out, the GGTour ChillTCG Cup number 3 is coming on Saturday. That's what we talked about so much in this podcast. $3,000 prize pool. Top 32 people win at least $50 in cash. It's a $10 entry fee to get into the tournament, but if you use the code CHILL2, all uppercases 2 in checkout, then you get $2 off your entry there. So it's right, 2. So definitely go play in all these tournaments. It supports the community. It supports the game and all of us, and gives us really something to work towards. So thank you guys so much for watching. As always, shout out to GGTour for sponsoring the podcast, as well as these tournaments. So, big shout out to GGTour. Yes, hearts out to them. And yeah, I don't know. That's it, right? Chill Series.
Good luck, guys. Take it easy until next week.
Yellhorn number 5. We're out of here.
Yellhorn number 5.
All right. See ya.